Indeed, how could anyone find capitalism objectionable once one realizes that it has, even in its attenuated form, increased the standard of living so dramatically that an average person now daily enjoys luxuries which hereditary monarchs could not boast of a mere 200 years ago? Well, Mises offers two basic answers to this question: envy and ignorance. First, regarding envy, he declares, quote, "What makes many feel unhappy under capitalism is the fact that capitalism grants to each the opportunity to attain the most desirable positions, which of course can only be attained by a few. Whatever a man may have gained for himself, it is mostly a mere fraction of what his ambition had impelled him to win. There are always before his eyes people who have succeeded where he failed. The price and market system of capitalism is such a society in which merit and achievements determine a man's success or failure." End quote. He elsewhere observed that for many, feudalism actually offered psychological comforts, mind you, not available within capitalist society. In a society based on caste and status, the individual can ascribe adverse fate to conditions beyond his control. There is no reason for him to be ashamed of his humbleness. It is quite another thing under capitalism. Here, everybody's station in life depends on his own doing. Well, envy and resentment, as we all know, has been condemned by virtually every known system of ethics, secular or religious, but yet it seems to lie hidden deep within some primitive part of a great many human psyches. That such emotions are in fact primitive is explored in detail by Helmut Schuck in his famous book, Envy, the Theory of Social Behavior. There he explains in memorable terms the mechanism at work, so allow me to quote him because he puts it beautifully. "What is decisive is the envious man's conviction that the envied man's prosperity, his success, and his income are somehow to blame for the subject's deprivation, for the lack that he feels. A self-pitying inclination to contemplate another's superiority or advantages, combined with some vague belief in his being the cause of one's own deprivation. This is also to be found actually among educated members of our modern societies who really ought to know better. The primitive people's belief in black magic differs little from these modern ideas. Whereas the socialist believes himself robbed by the employer, just as the politician in the developing country believes himself robbed by the industrial countries, so primitive man believes himself robbed by his neighbor, the latter having succeeded by black magic in somehow spiriting away to his own fields part of the former's harvest." End quote. Well, consider what follows if one couples this repugnant urge toward envy with a broad misperception of reality. That is, what if one fails to see that all economic and technological progress has been brought about by industrious individuals striving to apply reason to the problems of life? It is likely then that such progress will be thought of as some automatic gift from God or nature, and therefore that all humans deserve to share equally in these natural blessings. But what then if one's neighbor or one's employer or some famed industrialist possesses a noticeably larger basket of these goods? The conclusion must be clear. He must have unfairly appropriated the excess. He must be an exploiter. Further, the social system that permitted, nay, even encouraged such a result must itself be corrupt. As Mises frames the thoughts of the purveyors of this sort of attitude, quote, "Capitalism crowns the dishonest, unscrupulous scoundrel, the swindler, the exploiter, the rugged individualist. As conditions are under capitalism, a man is forced to choose between virtue and poverty on the one hand, and vice and riches on the other." In other words, capitalism does not just evoke sober and reluctant comments about its unfortunate inadequacy. It provokes vitriolic and self-righteous denunciations. It's not something like, oh, well, too bad capitalism didn't work. It seemed like a good idea. It's instead something like this. No decent, self-respecting human being can be in favor of laissez-faire capitalism. It is rife with racism, sexism, the rape of Mother Earth. It's fueled by avarice. It's driven by malice. It's the very institutionalization of exploitation. Well, in rebuttal, one can, of course, correctly describe socialism as the institutionalization of envy. For instance, Karl Marx famously and explicitly presents the process of economic progress and its concomitant rise in real wages in relative rather than absolute terms. He says, in this quote from Marx, if capital is growing rapidly, wages may indeed rise. The profit of capital rises incomparably more rapidly. The material position of the worker has improved, but at the cost of his social position. The social gulf that divides him from the capitalist is wider. It is by such sleight-of-hand tricks as this that Marx could be confronted, as he was, as you may know, with the fact that British agricultural workers experienced a 40% rise in real wage rates between 1849 and 1859, and yet airily dismiss this as insignificant. Actually, it is not just Marxian communism that enshrines envy in its doctrines and practices. The modern welfare state is, of course, guilty. Schoch, again, writing in the 1960s, gives fascinating examples of nations in which its citizens, driven by envy and resentment, have demanded to know the incomes of others. Schoch again, quote, the procedure of making tax returns public is found, incidentally, in Swiss communities, where it is possible to find out, without valid reason, the amount of income and assets declared by one's neighbor or competitor. There is further, in Sweden, a private firm which yearly produces a much consulted list giving the incomes of all families where these are more than $3,600 a year. And even in the United States, between 1923 and 1953, in that hallowed state of Wisconsin, there was a law permitting anyone to inspect any of his fellow citizens' tax returns, with all details and particulars. Of course, progressive taxation is itself a profound manifestation of envy. All taxes, though, by the way, whether sales, excise, income, or other, are unavoidably devices of redistribution, as I and others have argued in print. However, progressive income taxes seem to be the most blatant. On the one hand, if taxes were a proxy for some justifiable fee levied as a payment for governmental services actually demonstrably demanded by the nation's citizens, then such taxes should probably be on a per capita basis, not set as an accelerating percentage of one's income. Or if the value of the service were related to the monetary magnitude involved, such as protecting property against theft, at most the tax should be a fixed percentage of the value thereby made secure. To adopt progressive income taxes is to declare openly that the goal is punitive. As Schoch again points out, envy lies at the heart of the matter. Quote, the subjective sense of well-being of every income group is prejudiced by the income groups above it. In order to be rid of this feeling of deprivation, recourse is had to the progressive income tax. End quote.